Hello, in this video I'm going to introduce you the graph of square root function with linear expression. Okay, we only talk about square root function with linear expression. So we mainly talk about the graphing, okay, the sketching of the graph of a square root function. So okay, so I have know that fx, so fx is a square root of ax plus b. So as you know that square root, when you square root, of course the value inside the square root must be always positive. It's either 0 or positive value, alright, at least 0. So there are no real number. The output is not real when there is a negative inside there, right? So we talk about the output. There must be an output for this is your input and this is your output. So what is the input that you have? You must have. So means that the setting will be your ax plus b. Your ax plus b must be at least 0. This is very important concept. Alright, important concept for you. So means that the inside the function here, the linear expression here must be at least 0, so that fx is defined, right? So means that the x will be at least negative b over a. Alright, and the fx itself is at least 0. Why I mentioned this one, right? Do you ever find a square root that turned to be a negative, right? The square root of any number will be any number. You got 0, square root of 1 over 2. Alright, so of course you cannot square root a negative number because they already defined that the square root must be positive. So the input must be positive. So outcome will be also positive, right? So it means at least 0, right? At least 0. The fx at least 0. Alright? Means the inside is at least 0. The output also must be at least 0 for square root function. Okay, what does this mean? So let's look at the basic one. Okay, the basic one. So let's say you have square root of x. Square root of x. So for this, I'm going to introduce you the graph. So okay, the first graph. So let's say if fx, so of course x must be at least 0, right? 0, 1, 0.5, but cannot be negative. So this is your domain. So your domain have to be start from 0 up to infinity, right? From 0 to infinity. So how about range, right? This is the domain, and how to find the range? The range here, very simple. The range refer to the y here, right? So of course, if this is at least 0, the square root of x also at least 0, right? So so your fx must be at least 0, which is actually the y value at least 0. So means the range of f also from 0 up to infinity, right? Based on the observation here, so the graph for the square root, have to be in the first quadrant, right? Because the y have to be positive, must be more than 0, means above either these two quadrants, and the value of x greater than 0 means at this, it must be on the first quadrant. So the graph is happen to be this way. This is the graph for square root, right? The arrow here to show you that there is continue, right? So the graph for square root, where the x and y are positive. So this is the basic graph for fx equals to square root of x. So please take note. Alright, what happened if I put a negative in front of the square root, right? I put a negative in front of the square root. So of course it will be changed, right? But the domain will be still the same. The domain will still remain the same. Because why? X must be at least 0, right? At least 0. And the range, so means the domain is 0 up to infinity. And the range will change. Because square root of x at least 0. Square root of any number is at least 0. But there is a negative here. So I multiply with negative. So what happens when you multiply negative both sides? It will turn to be at most 0, always negative. Means that your fx will be less equal 0 and your y will be at most 0. So let's see the graph, right? The graph. So the graph, you can just memorize the graph, okay? The shape of the graph. So actually very simple. If the square root of x is always above the x-axis, right? So if you multiply negative, of course the y value will become negative. Means the graph will going downwards. Going downwards. Why? You see that? X more equals 0, y less or equals 0, right? It's in the fourth quadrant, where if you put negative here, easy for you. This is explanation. So you can just memorize. If fx equals square root of x, the graph will be this way. If negative, it will be reflected about the x-axis. That's all you need to know. So let's go further to another two types of basic graph for square root. Alright, let's say you have fx to be square root of negative x. Square root of negative x. Then student will always ask, sir, the square root shouldn't put negative inside there, right? Negative. But this is not a number. This is not something that you assure that this is negative, because you not even know what is the value of x, right? So you have to setting that the negative x must be at least 0. So you can, this one, you set the inside one to be at least 0. Then if you solve for x, you will get at most 0. You multiply negative, you will get x less or equal 0, right? So means that the value of x have to be negative. This is negative. So if you choose negative number, the negative will become positive. So the square root is defined. This one is defined when the x value is negative, right? So okay, of course this is your domain. So your domain now will be, your domain is will be negative infinity up to 0, right? Maximum 0. And your range, okay, all this is a graphic algebraic approach, right? Algebraic approach. So without the without this algebraic approach, you actually can sketch a graph, but you need to memorize, right? So range, so the range of here will be square root of negative x. Even though this is negative x, but the square root of any number is always positive, right? Always positive. It cannot get negative, right? So the graph will be still, the y will be still at least 0. So means the range will be 0 up to infinity, right? 0 up to infinity. So okay, if you look at the axis, the x and y, so you can see that the graph will going, look at this, the x-axis, x less or equals 0, means it's not here, it's not in these two quadrants. This is more or equals 0, right? This is for all the positive 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will be here, right? It will be here. And the y is more than 0, means it will be here. And x less or equals 0, y more equals, so it will be in this quadrant. It will be in this quadrant, right? In this quadrant. So, okay, very simple. So that if there is negative x, the graph go to the negative direction, right? Negative direction. So now I'm not going to explain again for another graph. So what happened? What happened if I put a negative in front of the, if I put negative in front of this function? What happened, right? So very easy. This one for sure is positive, right? It's always positive. Okay, now what value inside here, it doesn't matter, but square root always positive. But once you put negative, it will be always negative. Means that the graph will be going this way. Okay, I talk about this graph, so the graph will be going downwards and to the negative direction, right? And okay, so the graph for this one, it will be going in this direction. So this 4 graph is a basic graph that you must try to understand. Alright, so in the next video I'm going to talk about cases which the inside the function inside here is a linear expression with ax plus b. Alright, so that's all for this video.